Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flare. Hope you're all doing very well today, and it is time once more. It's time to Jund them out. That's right, we're playing Jund again on this channel in yet another donation league. This is the most requested donation league archetype we've got, and it might even be the most desired archetype overall if the views on the previous Jund videos are anything to judge by. So we're happy to be playing Jund again. Happy to be still on the green-black train, just with a little bit of red for spice. So we're going to talk about the list, and we're also going to talk about the video format. It's going to be a little bit different than what we're used to, by mutual agreement of the donor and myself. But first we need to thank the fine people responsible for this content. We are first off thanking two brand new Patreon supporters. We will thank Tobias Gallman. Tobias is a confidant, excuse me. Thank you so much, Tobias. Thank you for your support. Truly appreciated. And next up, we are thanking Alex Barbera. Alex is the very highest tier. Alex is of the Veil, so an extremely generous level of support from you, my friend. Thank you very, very much to both of you and to all Patreon supporters. And above all, for this particular video, we are thanking Mark Andre Kurisinski, and Mark is absolutely the reason for this video right here, because Mark is also an Of the Veil supporter who has been supporting long enough to earn a donation league, and Mark has let me borrow this price monster Renin 6. I made a call a little while ago saying, yeah, I'll buy mostly into Jund. This was like a couple weeks after it came out on MTGO, because people want me to play it. It's going to happen enough where people are going to request it that I should responsibly own the cards, for the sake of the channel and the sake of the content. But Renin 6 at 30 tickets, well, that's just a little bit too pricey. I'm sure it will come down. Big mistake. I should have just bought them back then. But in any case, we are still able to use the full 4 Renin 6 here. Thanks to Mark for, again, generously letting me borrow the cards, as well as generously supporting the channel. So hope you enjoy this video, my friend. This one is for you, and thanks again to all Patreon supporters. So this is Mark's list. It's the one he's been playing online and locally, with but one change that I have made to it after consulting him, and also after consulting Flying Delver's Jund Discord. So shout out to the Junders in there who helped me out with this. But basically, we were on 23 lands before the change, and while I think 23 lands in BGX in general, Jund is no exception, can be viable, there's a couple of reasons I was a little bit skeptical of that. One being, we are on the full 4 Bloodbraid Elf. We definitely want to curve out as consistently as possible to hit that 4 mana drop. Number 2, we do have a couple other 4-drop bombs in the sideboard, as well as some things like Tireless Tracker that are, for all intents and purposes, 4 drops most of the time. On top of all that, we also had a Baron Moor already in the 23 lands, and that's where I was, as a less experienced Jund player, was like, okay, is this viable? Should I be going up to 24? If so, what should the change be? And the consensus that I received is that if it's 23 lands, you should have a real land, a quote-unquote real land, not Baron Moor. And if you do want to play with the Baron Moor, you should really go up to 24 lands. So I agreed with that. It made sense to me. So we did make a cut, and there was once an Abrupt Decay here in this 2-drop slot. Mark said, hey, let's cut the Decay. Let's try to maximize the power of our Bloodbraid Elves. And we can replicate the effects of Decay well enough with, between bolts and pushes and discard and Kolagin's command and the ping of Renin 6. Hopefully Decay is the least missed of all of the possible spells we could cut. I agreed with him, and here we are. So I tossed in another Raging Ravine. Again, no Jund expert here. I don't know if this should be another land that's a little bit more able to cast spells on curve, but I took a quick look at the numbers. We have a pretty high quantity. We seem to have enough of all of the different colors. So I said, sure, let's just play another Raging Ravine. The other thing I considered was just another basic forest, actually, but I was like, maybe that's the rock player in me wanting a lot of basics, wanting a lot of the painless, untapped, clean mana, So let's just throw in the second Raging Ravine. Can't really go too far wrong with that if the mana base was already functional beforehand, right? So that's the one change I made. We added a 24th land at the expense of an Abrupt Decay. Otherwise, you're looking at what has come to be more or less a stock Jund list. It's not fully stock, though. There's a lot of variation that goes on, and I really like the one of Tireless Tracker here. I really think it's a really good value play along the Renin 6, in addition to the Bloodbraid Elf. Just the 2-for-1 potential right here is off the charts. I like that Mark is sticking with a one of Kolagin's Command. A lot of Jund lists these days don't necessarily play it. I'm a big fan, personally. Definitely happy to see that here. Definitely happy that we're fitting in a main deck Maelstrom Pulse as well. There are a lot of calls for this in the meta. It does definitely do things that other cards cannot do quite as well or at all. So I'm a huge fan of the list. I don't know what more else there is to say about it. We do have an appropriate level of graveyard hate for the Hogak Menace and for Phoenix and other things like this. I do like Kalitas here because, again, we're on 24 lands, we're playing to the big bombs. Kalitas is a big bomb who pulls double duty in the graveyard matchups, and the burn and other aggro, creature-based matchups. So you do get a lot of mileage out of Kalitas, and we are on Triple Plague Man, a card that is near and dear to my heart. Only 2 Fulminator Mage, but note that we do have a Ghost Quarter as kind of the third Fulminator. Not as good on average, probably, in the matchups where you want Fulminator, but not strictly worse. It notably can disrupt Tron, a turn 3 Tron on the draw, which is nice, and of course can be looped with Renin 6 for a much higher ceiling than a single Stone Rain. So if I were constructing my own Jund list, I think I would be doing the same thing here. We've got Noof, we've got a Weather the Storm. I have advised against this card in Rock. I think other cards do the job more in a less narrow way and in a way with a higher floor, and I don't think we need the higher ceiling of Weather the Storm in Rock, but in Jund, I like it. I like it as a one of. We're going to test it, see how it goes. So the list is looking awesome, my friends, and this is what we're going to be playing. So this is going to be a replay, but as I mentioned, it is not going to be a normal replay league. We're still going to do 5 rounds, 5 matches. They're all going to be derived from modern leagues, but this is going to be an amalgam of different matches from different leagues. So I'll explain why we're doing it this way. Mark has let me borrow these cards for an extended amount of time. I've had them for about a week as of the recording of this video, maybe for another couple days besides that. Thanks again, buddy. And Mark texted me a little while ago and said, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "The results have been pretty good. Some of the gameplay has been incredible, but I can just not get a great league for the life of me. Like, a league where I'm fully happy, like, every match is worth watching, this is worth uploading as a replay." Now, if you get a non-game while you're live recording, to me, that's kind of more acceptable than choosing to upload one as a replay. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of funny in the moment. We're all more or less experiencing it in real time. But if it's a replay, explaining the non-game, it just feels like I'm selling you short with the content. So Mark said, well, if you want to, why don't you upload 5 different games? As long as it's 5 games, they're all from leagues, they're all at a competitive level. Really show the deck working, and not necessarily meaning just show the wins. We're not going to do that here. What I want to do here, and I totally agreed with Mark, so that's what we're going with. What I want to do here is really let the deck flex, really let the deck spread its wings, but also try to draw some differences between Jund and Rock, because I am a Rock main, and I think most of my followers are Rock mains, even though I've been getting an increasing number of comments saying, I don't even play any green-black deck, I just like watching the channel. So much love to all of you, but I do still think most of the people watching this are Golgari mains. So what I'm going to bring you here is 5 different matches showing A, really good gameplay, and B, really situations where the pros and the cons of Jund are starkly apparent relative to Rock. So I hope you will stay with me for that. I hope you enjoy that. And shout out once again to Marc-Andre Kurasinski. Absolutely awesome to have you as a supporter, my friend. And shout out to our new Patreons as well, and to all Patreon supporters. Remember, if you are enjoying this content, link to that's in the description below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so, and without further ado, let's play some Jund. Alright, my friends, so this is the first of our 5 Jund matches we're showing you today, and appropriately enough, this was actually the first one I played with Mark's cards. So the timeline is correct, at least for now. And right away we're faced with an interesting dilemma, an interesting con that Jund brings relative to Rock. We've got a very functional 2-land hand in every way, except for the fact that we cannot cast one of our 2-lander spells. Now, I am not an experienced Jund player. I don't have a good sense for how often, like where along the scale it falls, where you throw back a hand because it doesn't have the 3 colors of mana. I think in this case it's a pretty fine keep, but again, I am not necessarily the most assured of that, or assured how strong of a keep this is relative to how close it is to being one we throw back. Funnily enough, our opponent is going to Inquisition us off of Blackcleave Cliffs and taking away the only uncastable card in our hand, right? So just goes to show the power of Wrenn and 6 in a fair matchup, and because the opponent went Blackcleave Cliffs Inquisition, we do know it's a fair matchup. We draw another Scoos, so okay, fair enough. We are hitting more castable spells at least, and then we'll Inquisition them right back off of our swamp, and we see that we are against Mardu Pyromancer. They've got Young Pyro, and they've got Old Pyro, and they've got Lightning Skelemental, which is an absolutely backbreakingly good card against fair decks like our own. You see this card in Mardu Pyromancer. You also see it as more of a direct build around with like the Thunderkin and Unearth deck. It's definitely a scary one. So even though they cannot quite cast it yet, we have to assume they're going to be able to, and we'll go ahead and take that while we can before it absolutely wrecks us. And opponent will go Young Pyromancer pass. We do draw a Lightning Bolt. Uncastable at the moment, but we were pretty priced into removing that Pyro one way or another, so we go ahead and push him. And the opponent will play a land. They did make their 3rd land drop, but they're going to pass back to us. So notably not interested quite yet in the Seasoned Pyromancer. They must have other good cards in hand. It's Path and 1 Unknown. We're continuing to draw red cards, so the keep is not really paying off. But I went ahead and played the Tarmogoyf. So why did I do that? Well, I kind of want the opponent to feel priced into pathing the Goyf, because we need to hit red mana, and we need to just hit more land drops in general to make this Bloodbraid Elf castable. So I think the opponent is going to be able to ignore a Scoos a lot more easily than they're able to ignore a Goyf, and or they'll be able to like bolt a Scoos if they drew a bolt. So I like running out the Goyf as path bait, and sure enough, that is exactly what happens. So there's our 3rd land, and there's our red mana. Opponent will Thoughtseize us, and there goes Bloodbraid Elf. So once again, they're taking away the uncastable cards just respecting what they can do over the course of a long game. And the opponent's just got that Seasoned Pyro in hand, and we are officially Scoos flooded. So we'll play one out. We're holding up Lightning Bolt, but right now we're not up to all that much. Excuse me. Opponent will rip Inquisition of Kozilek off the top. Now let's just take a moment here and say just how good the opponent's draws have been. They've hit the lands they've needed to hit. They've drawn a lot of discard early on where it's still really good, rather than in the mid to late game where it's going to be really bad. And they've been rewarded for slow rolling the Seasoned Pyro, because after they resolve this Inquisition, they're going to be able to deploy the Pyro, get maximum value out of it. Don't have to actually discard any gas, they just get to play a 2-2 and draw 2. So obviously that's really good. And here, so with respect to all that, do we want to just get the value out of bolting them in the face because we have so many redundant Scoozes? Well, we could, but remember, they're going to refill their hand. They've got a lot of kill spells, so I chose not to, in the hopes that the opponent will take the Lightning Bolt, and that's actually what they do. So I don't think that's the wrong play or anything, but I think that's definitely better for us than having just bolted them for 3. This is not a race at the moment. Not with our stable of grizzly bears, right? So we do draw wooded foothills. It's actually not that bad of a draw. Let's attack with the Skoos. If the opponent wants to throw out a block, that we get to use that to our advantage, right? But they, of course, do not. So what do we do here? Well, in my view, we do know they could have drawn some more discard, and we do know they're likely to draw kill spells if not discard. So I like just going as wide as possible, playing out our Ooze Tribal, and I did get a forest there. They could be on Blood Moon. It's less common main deck in Mardu Pyromancer than it used to be, but still a concern, so we definitely don't want to get mooned off of green with a triple Skoos board and a bunch of green threats in our deck. Opponent will decline the attack. They're sitting behind the Pyromancer, and they're going to bolt a Skoos. Sure. And then we untap, we draw Inquisition. They've got 2 cards in hand. You know, they didn't make a land drop, so while it's possible this whiffs, I don't think it's going to, and in any case, we don't have any other reason to really sandbag it. Opponent's got a Path to Exile, sure. We go get the last basic out of our deck. Pardon me. And Seasoned Pyromancer, last card in their hand. Dusty in here, guys. Excuse me once more. So that's actually a great window for our Inquisition, right? We want to get these Pyromancers in the graveyard when we have green mana. And that's exactly what we'll do. We'll eat 1 Pyromancer. We'll attack this, obviously they're not going to block. So we'll just go ahead and get the young Pyromancer out of the graveyard, come across for 4. So the fact that the opponent had Path to Exile and Seasoned Pyromancer in hand, those 2 things reward us immensely for the previous turn sequencing of just going wide. Instead of trying to hold up an activation earlier, we just get them all down, assume that maybe 1 will live at best, and then we get to untap. Opponent drew Unearth for turn. Very interesting decision. They could have unearthed the Skelemental just to hit us for 6, but that's another reason we were rewarded for going wide and deploying our whole hand. They don't have a great unearth target, it's just kind of hit us for 6, so instead they will cycle Unearth, looking for a redraw. Pyromancer is going to get in, and then they've got nothing, so it's back to us. We draw Inquisition, and we get a Lightning Skelemental out of their hand. So our Inquisitions have also come at pretty good times. Again, the Skelemental not doing as much damage at this stage of the game, but it's still really nice to get a threat out of the hand nice and cleanly with that Inquisition. And then there's no reason not to just get huge here with the Skoos. We are getting nice and big, putting them to 3. They're in Lightning Bolt range, and they top decked a land. So pretty unfortunate for the opponent, but hey, we're going to top deck the exact same land in Solidarity. So they get to throw the chump block out here. And that's exactly what's going on. We'll eat the Pyromancer, of course, before they get to untap and make some elementals with it. Unlike the opponent, we're going to sandbag our Blackcleave Cliffs because it just conceals information, and we have the Tireless Tracker. I think that's the correct play there, but our opponent had to play it out so they could potentially get to 5 mana for effects like Seasoned Pyromancer. But in any case, those minor corner case decisions prove to be irrelevant because whatever the opponent drew is not enough to stop the big Skoos from barreling down their throats as a 7-7 for victory. And yeah, guys, just goes to show the power of Scavenging Ooze, even in a deck where we are not as flush with green mana as we're used to being on the rock. And even though the Skoos' 2 brethren bit the dust, this one lived to tell the tale and to be the kind of mirror breaker here in the Mardu Pyromancer matchup. Now, also worth noting that the red cards were quite good in theory, so much so that the opponent took them away with discard before they were even castable. So definitely red and 6, Bloodbraid Elf, also good mirror breakers here, but Skoos got us over the line. That was a fun one, and let's take a look at how we sideboard with Jund against Mardu Pyro. Okay, so sideboarding. I guess real quick before we talk about sideboarding, I'll just mention that this is a replay because that was Mark's request. The donor decides. If they want a replay, they get a replay. Even a kind of cobbled together from various leagues replay like this. Or if they want live recorded, they get live recorded. I know a lot of people love the replays. You're probably happy with that, but just thought I'd mention that. We've been doing a high amount of replays lately. We'll go back to the live content for sure in the next couple videos. So anyway, just mentioning that. But as far as how we sideboard against Mardu Pyromancer on Jund, so Nile Spellbomb is a premier card. We see Unearth out of their deck. We see Faithless Looting. Cards like Smiting Helix are in there. And of course, Lingering Souls can be in the mix. There's just lots and lots of reasons. Seasoned Pyromancer, of course. Lots of reasons where we want a value-oriented piece of graveyard hate. We don't want to play cards that put us down on resources necessarily, but we do want to interact with the graveyard. Spellbomb, arguably the best card, but we have a lot of really good cards to bring in. Plague Engineer, obviously, with the amount of tokens they generate, Plague Man can be a really great way to interact with them in a value-positive way. Kalida's Trader of Get is just a good, grindy card. The replacement effect that it brings is good against things like Seasoned Pyromancer, and in general, it's just kind of a value engine for the deck. Damnation to sweep up their wide boards. Often, it will end up being not the cleanest X for one, because either we have a creature down, like, let's say we have a creature down and they have 2 real creatures and then some tokens. Really, in terms of card spent, that's just kind of a 2-for-2, but that's often very necessary, and it does have a higher ceiling as well, but it's just a card you want, even if it's not always the cleanest X for one. And finally, Liliana the Last Hope. They play a whole lot of X1s, and she's a good, grindy card. In any kind of a fair matchup, you probably want her. So these 9 cards can all come in pretty clearly. Not particularly interested in much else. Grafdigger's Cage is interesting. I think we'd have to maybe see even more of the deck, make sure they're on as high an amount of graveyard effects and flashback effects as we realistically can expect. Even so, I'm not sure we want it, simply because, again, we have to play along the value axis, and this is kind of going a card down to shut off the back halves of some of their cards. Might be worth it, maybe not, but we have 3 Ooze, 3 Spellbomb, among other things. I think it's enough. And in terms of what comes out, so these are 10 cuttable cards. We have, you could even say 11, because I'm sure some people would cut all 4 copies of Liliana of the Veil, but I personally did choose to leave one in. I think leveraging exactly one is doable, but we do mostly want to move away from Liliana. And we do also have the freedom to cut a land in a grindy matchup like this, and I think it should be Cliffs rather than Marsh, because we want all the green we can get for Scoos. Then we could cut all discard. I think that would be totally fine, but especially on the draw, we can leave an Inquisition in. Everything they showed me is CMC 3 or less, might as well save the life, Bedlam Reveler is not really in vogue in these decks anymore, but if you see Reveler, that would be a reason to leave in a Thoughtseize maybe instead of an Inquisition. But in any case, this is how I sideboarded. Let's check out game 2. So we're on the draw against our Martyr opponent, who has kept 7, and once again, we've got the redless mana with a really good hand otherwise. Again, no Jund expert. I don't know how often we're supposed to throw back hands like this, but I did choose to keep it. Like, we know now that we're an attrition-based matchup. We don't want a mulligan. Any land drop is pretty much good, because it's either going to be red, or it's going to give us enough lands where we have the full luxury of cracking Nurturing Peatland. This hand has everything we can ask for if we hit red, because we can kill an early young Pyromancer. Red and 6, really high value card in the matchup. Plague Man is a good hate piece. Bloodbraid Elf in any kind of attrition is awesome. So, and we've got the potential for the Peatland red and 6 loop. Opponent's got Bloodstained Mire Pass, and we draw another non-red land. So that's a little annoying, but again, any land drops here are pretty much fine for the above-mentioned reasons. Opponent will have a turn 2 Faithless Looting is how they're going to start their plays, and Smiting Helix is indeed in the deck. Flashbacking potential is real with their graveyard at the moment. They also pitch a Lightning Bolt, interesting. Then they're going to shock in a Blood Crypt and Inquisition us. So once more, they rate the Ren and 6 so highly that they take it away despite other good takes, and we promptly draw another one. Would be awesome if we had the red mana, but we don't. I'm going to run out Peatland because there's every chance that we are incentivized to really aggressively crack the Peatland and dig. It's not often that we want to kind of time walk ourselves to do that because we are slowing down our mana development that way, but we just keep drawing red cards and we don't have red mana, we might have to. Opponent's got the Cabal Council of Allocation. It's a fine card against us, definitely a reasonable one to play, just good value. So we do decide not to crack the Peatland quite yet. Wanted to give ourselves the option, but Cabal is not something that sent me into full desperation. And we do draw another playable card, which is Tarmogoyf. Pretty happy to run that one out. They have not shown us Fatal Push. Could be in the deck, but they've showed us Bolt, which can't kill the Goyf, and they showed us Path, which is going to get us red mana. So if they want to remove the Goyf, they're going to need to show us something that we don't necessarily know is in their deck. And of course it doesn't trigger Cabal, so really nice play there, really nice draw. Opponent's got the turn 3 Seasoned Pyro. Speaking of nice plays in the matchup, pitching yet more things that can get value out of the graveyard, another Helix, another looting, making 2 elementals. The value is real, not gonna lie, but the Goyf is a little bit too big for anything over there to get frisky. And here we go, we drew a red land. Kind of the worst red land to draw, because we wanted maybe something to put in the yard to buy back with Renin 6, or in general we want to leave the basics in our deck against Path to Exile maybe, but we won't complain, right? We hit the red, and it is Bloodbraid Elf time, so we actually had a couple interesting options here. We could Plague Man Naming Elemental, and hold up Lightning Bolt, which is really not that bad. But I don't think we quite need to do that quite yet. Would rather maybe save the Plague Engineer for if they've gone even wider with the elementals, and or if they've got a young Pyromancer, which we could either kill the Pyro himself naming human and shrinking these things, or just kill more elementals in one hit. So if we're not going to go Plague Man, we could actually go Renin 6, crack the Peatland, and start the value chain nice and early. But I can't quite reliably protect the Renin 6 yet. Even if they don't have a way to remove the Goyf, which they might, they're just going to be able to kind of suicide with this wide board into the Renin 6, so I think this was a better window for a Bloodbraid Elf, and look at that, we got our Renin 6 off of the Elf anyway. You've just got to love Bloodbraid's ability to be a proactive play with a reasonable floor and a really high ceiling, so we just kind of get to have our cake and eat it here too, and with nothing to buy back, we might as well ping an Elemental, reduce their ability to have great attacks next turn, or even suboptimal, but potentially worthwhile bad attacks, right? So we're sitting back with everything. We're just clearly have the resource advantage at the moment, and if we get our Planeswalkers to stick. Opponent's got an Inquisition of Kozilek, and they will take away Plague Engineer. Interesting. I kind of half expected to see the Renin 6 go, given how aggressively they've taken it to this point in the series, and also the fact that they might be able to get this one off the field. But they didn't. They take the Plague Man, and hey, just shows that we have so many bombs in the matchup. Plague Man is definitely another one. They do have a path for the Goyf. And then they're going to attack at the Renin 6 with the Seasoned Pyromancer. Now, Seasoned Pyro is something they're happy to trade away because it gets value out of the graveyard, but you know what? I'm happy enough to take that trade because we're trying to maximize the value of our resources, and I think I rate the Renin 6 on the board a little bit more highly than the 3-2. Opponent's got the follow-up Thoughtseize, and boy am I glad I did, because otherwise they would have Thoughtseized the Renin 6 away, I believe, and then we would have no Renin 6, and I'd be very, very sad. But now we do, so they just take the less redundant Lightning Bolt. We top deck a trophy. Okay, fine with me, but our plan A is to start accruing a massive resource advantage by cracking the Peatland, buying the Peatland back, seeing a new card, and that new card happens to be another Tarmogoyf, so you've got to love it. We are rewarded for aggressively protecting our Renin 6 last turn, because now we're protecting it even more, and we're pulling ahead on cards while we do so. We are holding up trophy this turn as well if we need to. Opponent's got a graveyard full of a ton of value, but it's worth noting that none of it is perfect right here, right now. They don't have the mana to get the elementals back off of the back end of Season Pyro. They can cast a Smiting Helix, but they know we have another Renin 6 in hand, so that's a little bit medium, and spending their whole turn looting is not particularly appealing. They do, however, have a looting out of hand, which is actually much nicer. They pitch a Blood Moon, so worth noting, and a land that they don't necessarily need, but all they have left in hand is another land, and they will indeed Helix the Renin 6, even though they know we've got one in hand. I guess they just figure they've got to fight through them eventually. Might as well start now before we get any graveyard hate active, right? So, makes sense, and in the interest of mana efficiency more than anything else, we are going to Trophy Kambal on the end step, because with the Renin 6 Peatland loop, we're going to be using our mana basically to its fullest extent every turn, so we might as well kill a reasonably high value permanent right here, right now. Notably, this does turn on Pyromancer flashback, but that's alright. That is just a pair of elementals. It cannot compete with our Renin 6 Peatland loop, right? So that's exactly what we're doing. We're finding some okay stuff. Pulse is an okay draw, but nothing else too exciting. So for now, we are simply just going back to the value plan, getting ahead on resources, and even though we have a really good clock on the field, we're going to stay back. So why do we stay back? Well, that's because Renin 6 is just unbeatable value alongside Peatland if we can protect it, and the fact that we would be opening ourselves up to getting shipped for one means that the Smiting Helix could finish off Ren this turn. So that is worth holding back the Tarmogoyf for, in my opinion. Let's see what the opponent's got. It's just going to be another looting out of the graveyard. So they've got their own, kind of shade of inevitability here with the fact they can filter away all these bad top decks. And the opponent does filter into a Path to Exile, so they have cleared the way for the Elemental. Big problem for the opponent is they don't quite have enough mana after all that looting to cast a Helix as well. So all they can do is chip at the Renin 6 and hope it's good enough to Helix it away next turn. But problem with that is we get to activate Ren yet again. We get to see a bunch of new cards. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of lands, a lot of less than optimal things. So what do we do here? Well, I actually chose, hilariously enough, to spend a Damnation on a lone elemental token. Once again, just rating the Renin 6 and Nurturing Peatland loop so high that we're going to Damnation away a lone token. We could have pulsed as well, but we're seeing enough cards that I think it's actually better to use the Damnation there. Pulse can still X for one certain boards, and we, of course, are going to try to find a creature of our own soon, so we might as well not have to wrath our own board later in the game. So, opponent draws for turn, but it looks like whatever in their hand is not as appealing as getting these two elementals out of the graveyard. Our top deck is Scavenging Ooze. Great find, a little less than optimal, because of course they just got the Season Pyro value, but we'll still take it. We're going to still dedicate ourselves to the long game, though, by beginning with the Peatland Renin 6 loop, finding a Bloodbraid Elf. Tempting, as always, to just jam the Bloodbraid and see what happens. That's really not bad at all. However, this is also pretty darn good window for Scavenging Ooze. We're going to activate, eat that Smiting Helix, and pass holding up another activation. No need to do anything else with that quite yet. The Scooze as a Grizzly Bear is enough to eat attacking elementals. Opponent will flash back a Faithless Looting. We couldn't stop that. They have another one anyway. And they just loot away a couple lands. They're going to go ahead and scoop it up. So, guys, this is something that is a massive, massive appeal to Jund right now. The Renin 6 loop with Nurturing Peatland or with Barrenmoor is really, really difficult for decks to tangle with. We were just about empty-handed at various stages of the game, and we had to spend resources sub-optimally. Damnation on the lone elemental token being kind of the greatest example of that, but we have such ridiculous power of draw, of inevitability with Renin 6 looping with Nurturing Peatland every single turn that it's just worth doing. It's just worth protecting that loop, and that loop buried the opponent. They were still at 20. They hadn't taken a single point of damage yet, at least not from us. And they still scooped it up because after all the resources they spent, after all the filtering, they're still very far behind. We've now got a threat that's going to start chipping away at their graveyard. We've got the loop. We've got 5 cards in hand. It's just not going to go their way. So the power of the grind, my friends, is strong with this particular build of Jund with 4 copies of Ren and 6. For Liliana, the Veil is a huge part of the grind power, even though she's not the greatest in this exact matchup. Definitely gotta love it. Any green-black player has gotta love seeing a match like that. So we take down Mardu Pyromancer, and we'll see you for the next round. Okay, second match here with this Jund list, my friends, and we've kept, in the first match, both games, we kept the redless mana, but I don't think we can keep the no black mana. Yes, it can cast Tarmogoyf on turn 2, but it does not cast anything else. So, as unfortunate as it is, we do have to mulligan, and then we have what at first glance looks like yet another redless hand, but of course it's not because the Catacombs can get red. This one we've got to keep. It's going to be matchup dependent and perhaps top deck dependent as to whether it's any good, but we're going to toss back the Tomb, and definitely a respectable 6. Opponent's got Spire Bluff Canal pass on turn 1. Looks like either Storm or Phoenix with an opener like that, and we draw Assassin's Trophy. Okay, you know, it's action, whatever. Back to the opponent, and opponent is going to have a turn 2 Thing in the Ice, so Phoenix confirmed. End step, we'll get a Blood Crypt. We untap, we're drawing a Swamp. Not the very best draws thus far, it must be said. So no need to panic too early, in my opinion, about the trophy. If they've got the ability to flip Thing on turn 3, they've got the ability. It can be just as bad to stymie our own development, right? So I'm just going to do the proactive thing. We're going to play Ren and 6. We're going to buy back a land. This kind of unmulligans us, and it means we're fixing our mana totally for whatever we might need from here on out. Opponent will play another Thing in the Ice, so safe to say they're not flipping this first one. Scalding Tarn and pass. We draw Barrenmoor. Definitely a nice little loop with Ren and 6. It's just a question of whether we can navigate ourselves into a position where it's going to be going to take over the game for us. So right now we don't actually have anything all that appealing to do in hand, so we'll begin by cycling the Moor. We draw Maelstrom Pulse. Well, that's a heck of a draw with a pair of Thing in the Ice staring us down across the table. Of course, we can't cast it quite yet this turn, but we'll buy back the Moor. Great value. We're going to play Swamp, and we're going to pass. So we are holding up the Barrenmoor on the end step. We're also holding up Assassin's Trophy in case we need to kind of use that as an emergency piece of interaction. End step, the opponent is going to shock in Esteem Vents. Lightning Bolt gets pointed at Ren and 6. Okay, that must mean they're either going to bolt it again, which is a nice 3 or maybe 4 for 1, all things considered, or they've got some other way to try to finish it off. And it's a 4th land they're tapping out for Arclight Phoenix. So this is actually working really, really well for us because they're nowhere near still flipping these things. And we actually get to protect our Ren and 6 with a trophy if we want to. Now, do we want to? Well, in my opinion, yeah, we do. Once again, we're happy to do what's kind of a resource-negative trade in order to protect our ability to accrue more resources on the back of a Ren and 6 plus Barrenmoor loop, much like we saw in the last round. So we trophy the Phoenix. Opponent will use the land we gave them to cast a Serum Visions, which is all well and good. But then it's back to us, and that Maelstrom Pulse is burning a hole in our pockets, right? So we're going to go ahead and pulse away the 2 things. I'm being extremely respectful of my life total by getting a basic land there. Our mana's still not great in terms of like skews and all that, but we've got ways to continue developing that. Might as well just be really, really respectful of our life. We'll cycle the Moor main phase, of course, so we can buy it back with the Ren. And we found a Tarmogoyf, so good card in the matchup. Back to you, opponent. We've had so many 2-for-1s already, it's been insane. Opponent will play Aria of Flame. They do have the Aria main deck. That's not that uncommon, and it's an incredibly good card against us. We do have answers to it in the deck, but we've already spent 2 of them. So whether we can find another one is definitely interesting, and it's this is an open question. So Liliana of the Veil is a good draw, and it's actually a perfectly viable play here to go Liliana, tick up, because we have the resource advantage. Very, very easy for us to do so. And then play the Tarmogoyf, and that might actually be our best way to race them. Because, of course, we need to clock them as proactively as possible before Aria of Flame takes over the game and kills us. Now, that's one option. The other option is to just YOLO with the Bloodbraid Elf, and that's actually a decent way to race them too, right? Because it itself is a haste threat. It might cascade us into another haste threat, or into just another creature to help the clock over the next couple turns. So definitely an interesting decision. I did decide to go ahead and cycle the Baronmoor first for more information. We draw another Liliana of the Veil. The Baronmoor cycle admittedly has kind of priced us into the Bloodbraid Elf because we can no longer go Lily into Goyf this turn. And, to be fair, I think that is a slightly better play overall, if for nothing else than the fact that Liliana could put a Phoenix into the yard and could lead to a really nutty next turn from the opponent. So instead we're just going to go Bloodbraid Elf, and look at that, rewarded, finding our other trophy. We've been drawing and top decking really well this game, it must be said. So we get to do everything. We trophy away the Aria, we get to clock proactively, we even got a Baronmoor buyback that turn. We just are doing everything. Opponent will Flame Slash with Bloodbraid Elf. That is no problem. Then they're going to Lava Dart Renin 6. Then they're going to cast Faithless Looting, pitching Lightning Bolt Scalding Tarn, and they get the Phoenix back. So yeah, it's a nice turn for the opponent. A really nice turn all around. They get to finish off the Ren, but hey, they've got no cards in hand. We've got 7. So the value battle has been well and truly won. We just need to not lose the game from here. So Liliana edicting away the Phoenix, totally fine in this particular scenario. We get to play the Goyf. We get to run out of land. We're going to run out Peatland because Peatland can cycle the Moor, and then, of course, Peatland can be cracked later on if we need even more gas. But I do like Liliana into Goyf there a little bit more than Bloodbraid Elf, because now they just cannot answer a 6-7 Goyf, especially main deck. They're just going to kill them in 2 hits or force them into chump blocks or something, right? So, end step, they crack a Canopy Land of their own. They're going to loot out of the graveyard, pitching away a couple of fetch lands. It's good card selection, but it's not the army of Phoenixes they probably need to win the game from here. Then it's going to be Serum Visions. Then it's going to be Lava Dart, finish off the Liliana. Sure, you got it. Phoenix will be bought back, but is priced into hanging back because we are ahead on the life total. End step will cycle the Moor. We find Scavenging Ooze, another good find. Another good find. So, let's begin before anything else by attacking with the Goyf. Give them as little info as possible, force them to decide. They decide to block with the Phoenix, which is probably the correct play, but does kind of play into our hands. Will Inquisition, and we see Thing in the Ice, Crackling Drake. So some good threats. Thing is the only legal take, but we get to kind of, once more, my friends, we get to kind of do everything here. So we will play the Skoos, eat the Phoenix, and then we get to play the Liliana, get the Crackling Drake out of their hand, and we do have to pitch our own Bloodbraid Elf, which feels bad, but it is well worth it because it leaves them totally out of gas against a really impressive board, and the opponent will simply scoop after they see their top card on the draw step. So that was a feel-good game, my friends. Remember that we did mulligan to 6, and we were left with a relatively clunky-looking opener, but Renin 6 got the value train going nice and early. We found the interaction that we needed to stave off their early threats, and the Renin 6 loop pulled us way ahead in the mid-game alongside Baronmoor, and then Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, Liliana of the Veil, the core green-black cards closed out the game with plenty of resources and life points to spare. Feels really good to beat Phoenix that way, my friends. Now let's take a look at the sideboard, see what to do. Alright, my friends, so as I've disclaimed already before, no Jund expert here, only a rock expert, or a self-styled one anyway, but this was my take on how we sideboard against Izzet Phoenix with this deck. You'll have to let me know if you think I've gone astray, right? But these are our four best cards. Again, Nile Spellbomb, way to attack their graveyard mechanics while being value-oriented because we have to compete on both axes. Damnation, once again, to clean up the board, especially because they have Crackling Drake in there. They just have threats. This is an answer. That's why we play it. These cards are also in consideration, and in fact, I think Grafdigger's Cage should probably just come in. Realistically speaking, I've heard some people say before, like, calling the deck Izzet Phoenix is a misnomer because it's not as much a Phoenix deck as a Thing in the Ice deck. That may be true overall. When I'm on green-black, I think I mostly lose to Phoenixes when I do drop games. It's Phoenix is still the number one threat we need to shut down, so Grafdigger's Cage will definitely come in. These two cards are also playable, Kalitas Trader of Get and Weather the Storm, but the problem with Kalitas, it just doesn't line up all that well against Thing in the Ice. Like, an unflipped Thing can chump it. Thing bouncing it is annoying because it's a 4-drop at such a tempo loss. It cannot block their flyers. You really need to already be doing well for Kalitas to be good. And then even if he is good, again, all of those things, the zombie tokens are kind of irrelevant as bodies, or less relevant than we'd like, I should say. For all the same reasons I just mentioned, Kalitas himself is not that relevant of a body. So, decent card, playable card, but this is more if you have, like, bad cards to bring out. You can play the Kalitas. And then we have Weather the Storm. Maybe I'm underrating the card, but I don't see it here as being that great, specifically because they've adopted Aria of Flame as a universally included technology. Before Aria of Flame, sure, okay. Even then, it's not like a Silver Bullet because, yeah, they have a chain of spells that ends in them getting a bunch of Phoenixes back. You get to have a nice fat life gain off of Weather the Storm. That's all well and good, but all that kind of does is rewind the damage their Phoenixes are doing to you that turn. And then maybe a little bit of buffer on top of that. You still have to answer the Phoenixes. You still need to answer them really quickly, right? So, I actually decided, I think, to side in not Weather the Storm and maybe not even Kalitas. These 5 cards for sure, we're considering the Kalitas. Some would consider Weather, I am not. And we actually have a lot of cards to consider coming out. We have to think of what the very best ones to side out are going to be. I think since we are on 4 Inquisition, siding out these 2 Thoughtseizes is pretty free. You can consider siding out Bolt because, again, it does not line up well against any of their threats in particular. Renin 6 Ditto, the ping effect is very, very poor here, and the +1 is a good consistency tool, but this is not that grindy of a matchup, so this can be a little bit too dirtily for its own good. Kolagin's Command has some fine use cases, but again, the 2 damage, the shock mode, not great against their threats, and Tracker is just a bit slow. So we want to be pulling from some of this category. Here's what I did. I'm going to side out 2 Thoughtseizes. We're going to side out 2 copies of Renin 6. Still don't mind leaving 2 around just to make sure we're curving out, and because if we are in a position to make it a grindy game, we can get that loop going, it's going to be great. From there, do we want the Kalitas? Do we not? I actually decided on the draw, we're not going to want the Kalitas. It's very clunky. It's a little unimpactful overall. And, we could side out maybe of these. My favorite things to side out would be a 3rd Renin 6 or the Tracker or a 1 of Lightning Bolt. I do think we're going to leave the Kolagin's Command in just because hand attack is pretty good even if it's non-targeted. So I think I rate the Command higher than those cards. And I did decide after all was said and done to just trim a Lightning Bolt and set up something like that for Game 2. If they take us to Game 3 on the play, maybe we'll bring in a Kalitas, maybe we'll change things up a little bit more from there. But for the game you're about to see, we were sideboarded just like that. Let me know what you think. On the draw here against Izzet Phoenix, and this would be an even sketchier keep than the one we threw back Game 1. Yeah, got a mullet. Feels bad because it's got a lot of really good stuff, but we just don't have the mana. So back it goes. And this hand, well, we don't exactly have the full mana for this either. Remember that this is an ETB tapped mono black land. Very, very bad as an actual land drop, but probably serviceable in context of the alternative, which is going to 5. Very, very bad, notably, not only for the things I just mentioned, but it also doesn't help cast Ren in 6, which in turn would help our land, of course, get better. So we've got to keep this one anyway, though. It's got a lot of things we like. Inquisition, Tarmogoyf, Nile Spellbomb, all great cards. And sadly, we bottomed the Bloodbraid Elf just because we're that far away from casting her. Opponent's on 7 with a tapped Steam Vents turn 1, and we draw another Inquisition. So this is a bit awkward, just insofar as we are completely priced into a black land off of our wooded foothills, despite our other land being black. So we're going to be shut off of either red or green for at least a moment, until we top deck some more lands, hopefully. But we've got to get black for Inquisitions. We've got to get black for the Spellbomb activation. And I did choose to get green so we can at least cast Tarmogoyf at some point, guaranteed. But first things first, we're going to Inquisition. We've got to Inquisition over Spellbomb here because if they've got a Thing in the Ice plan early on, we don't have an answer to it. And if they're on a Phoenix plan, well, hopefully Inquisition can help disrupt that as well. So we see a second land, double looting, Lava Dart, Lightning Bolt, Thing in the Ice. It's a very, very good hand, but it actually gets a lot worse if we just snipe that thing right out of their hands. So it feels good. And the opponent's just passing back to us. Interesting to not see at least one looting fired off there. I guess they believe in the power of their hand to play reactively here. And we did draw Scavenging Ooze. It's a good card in the matchup, but it does not solve any of the current issues we're facing. So, once again, we could run out the Spellbomb here in case we were afraid of them going off next turn with Phoenixes, but I have faith in Inquisition's ability to disrupt that. Opponent top deck Leyline of the Void. That's a very unfortunate top deck for them. And we do just go ahead and take away Lightning Bolt. And all of a sudden, their hand is actually quite poor. And speaking of things that are quite poor, we've got to use Baron Moor as an actual land drop. Never ideal, but that is what it is. Opponent drew a land for turn, so they turned that fetch into a mountain. They're going to loot. They're going to get that dead Leyline out of their hand along with an island that they found off the top. Then they're going to loot again, so this is where things get a little bit scary. So I guess the main reason the opponent was saving those lootings and playing so slowly is because they're just trying to have a really big looting turn. Here on turn 3 makes total sense, and especially because they found yet another looting off of their other lootings. But fortunately for us, we fade the Phoenixes. They loot away a thing, and they get some good value, some good hand sculpting, but they actually just went down on resources, didn't end up with a Phoenix, so we get a bit of a reprieve. However, our draws continue to be pretty terrible. Again, good cards in the matchup, but we just cannot leverage them all that efficiently. So, we are very far ahead on resources under many, many circumstances. I would say the correct play here is to simply pass. We're going to be really conservative with our spell bombs. We need to force them to spend even more resources putting Phoenixes into the yard before we crack our spell bomb, and or to spend like in a braid or something trying to get our spell bomb. And of course we'll crack it in response. But we are so desperate for red mana, or for any lands in general to make our scoozes better, that I think, and their graveyard is so full, and they have 3 lootings there, that I think overall those are enough incentives to crack the spell bomb on the main phase, looking for another land, and instead we're ooze flooded, just like against Mardu, we're flooded on oozes. But hey, the ooze flood won us that game. Maybe it will help us win this one as well. But feels really bad to not hit more lands, and we still don't hit a land. So our keep has been pretty significantly punished. But again, I don't think we're supposed to throw it back. I think it's better than going to 5 to keep a 2-lander with Inquisitions and Tarmogoyf and Scooz and Spellbomb. Definitely a keep, but hasn't panned out quite yet. Then again, neither has the opponent's keep, right? So both decks are kind of floundering a little bit. We do have a Tarmogoyf down. The opponent kicks things off with a Monomorphos. They hit their 4th Faithless looting of the game on turn 5, so they're seeing a ton of their deck. And now they have a Phoenix in the yard. They cast a Thought Scour as well. Fortunately, still only 1 Phoenix. So we have been lucky that there's only 1 Phoenix so far in the kind of the top half of their deck, but they do get one back, and their ace is on, so they're going to hit us for 3. Goyf is nice and big. We draw a land, but it's one of the worst lands, being a shock land and a non-red land. So no Renin 6 value quite yet. No Bloodbraid Elf in the wings. And we have to pay life on top of that. But we're still pretty happy to hit any land, I guess. So we'll play a Scooz. We are going to main phase. Eat that looting. Definitely correct here in my opinion. One reason not to eat looting is if the opponent is reasonably expected to have a lot of gas in hand, and or if you can eat threats instead. Neither of those things are true. We definitely just eat the looting main phase and crash in for 5. Tarmogoyf. Nice and angry. Nice and big. Nice and angry. Opponent will kick off their turn with a sleight of hand. Then they're going to smack us with Phoenix. We are down to 9. 9 is actually kind of a scary life total to be at. A couple bolts and another Phoenix hit, we are dead. And there's no creatures to eat at this exact moment with Scoo, so what do we do? Well, we're going to go ahead and attack. Before we make any other decisions, give them any other information, we will attack. And the opponent does have a lightning bolt, but they feel priced into bolting our Scoos. Very interesting. Kind of expected to see any bolts going upstairs, but obviously Scooz is a premier card in the matchup. You can't exactly blame them for that, and of course that depends on what else is going to be in their hand. But Goyf will connect for 6. And then, interesting question, do we replay a Scooz because they were so scared of that one that they bolted it, despite us being at 9? I don't know. I thought about it, but in the end I said 6-7 Tarmogoyf, you can't really go wrong. Let's just play the Goyf instead. And, you know, if I was going to play the Goyf, technically I could have eaten something with the Scooz before that bolt resolved, but there's nothing of particular import to eat, so that doesn't matter much. Opponent's got the Aria of Flame, so this card is absolutely spectacular in the deck, but right here, right now, with no 4th land still, we see it being a bit of a non-bow, because their best route to victory was, again, just kind of phoenixing and bolting us out of the game. And now they were priced into bolting the board and then playing the Aria, resetting our life total back to 19. It's not very good for the opponent. And now they're, of course, priced into jumping with the Phoenix. They're going to try to win the game on the back of Aria if they can untap next turn. But we finally hit another land, and it's a fetch, so we can make it red. And you know what we're going to do, guys. We're going to Bloodbraid. We're going to Bloodbraid because Bloodbraid is a 3-2 with haste, and that is enough to finish off the opponent. So on top of that, we cascade into a Maelstrom Pulse. We can win in style a couple different ways. We can Pulse the Phoenix and swing for 15, or we can Pulse Aria Flame to send a message and swing for lethal anyway. So we had them a couple different ways. Bloodbraid Elf is such a feel-good finisher, you've got to love it, but the big, bad Goyfs were what were getting us across the line. And of course, our interaction early on was so good. 2 Inquisitions and 1 Spellbomb, these cards proved to be so good that even though we were stuck on just 2 lands with no red for the majority of this game, we slowed the opponent down, we crippled them, just as hard as our own lack of top-decking lands crippled us. And eventually our card quality got us there right at the kind of crucial turning point of the game. Because, of course, like I said, the opponent was going to be pressed into the chump block, but you can imagine them doing a lot of work with the Aria of Flame. They can kill you out of nowhere with this card, so I think we got over the line just in time. You know, who knows, maybe they wouldn't have had it anyway, but I'm certainly happy we didn't have to find out, right? So another great performance here from the deck. This was more of the kind of green-black cards carrying us here, but of course, Bloodbraid as a finisher, not to be underestimated. A lot of people, when they argue against this card, they're like, a 3-2 haste for 4 is unplayable in Modern, so if you cascade into something that's a whiff, then you've just played an unplayable card. But remember that that's merely the floor. The ceiling is Bloodbraid into Pulse, or Bloodbraid into Trophy like we saw in Game 1, or Bloodbraid into Liliana of the Veil, or Renin 6, or what have you. So you gotta love it. Feels good to spin and win with the Bloodbraid Elf, and we take down Izzet Phoenix in a nice clean 2-0. Feels good, my friends. See you for round 3. third match with Mark's Jund list, my friends, and our opponent is on the play. We are keeping, it's a fine balanced hand. We do need to hit that third land to make it great, but hey, for once we've got the ability to get the right mana, kind of, and it's certainly a fine all-around keep in a blind game 1. And the opponent will mulligan all the way down to 3. They will play Urza's Tower, and they will pass. So, you don't hate to see that, do you? So, obviously feels pretty good. We draw a trophy on top of that, so we can even hit the tower. And the opponent has Expedition Map, Urza's Power Plant. So, interesting that they didn't play the map last turn, because we would actually have just whiffed and then been forced to spend turn 2 trophying a Tron land. Obviously still going to be fine, but we do get to take the map, which is just insult to injury after they mulligan all the way down to 3, and then they're going to scoop it up. So in the opening of this video, I explained why Mark and I mutually decided to show you matches from different leagues rather than one league, because there were just so many non-matches in each and every league that I played, despite a lot of overall good gameplay being seen. So why did I show you this one? Well, number one, because non-games are not necessarily the greatest content unless it's the green-black deck getting the free win against Tron. Tron has been the mid-range killer for every iteration of mid-range and Tron respectively, pretty much for the entire history of Modern. So if there's going to be a non-game that people are going to like to see, I think it was just that one. And look, I don't even think Tron is that egregious personally. Maybe that's my rock player bias speaking, but I think the matchup is not even that bad at all, and there are way more unpleasant decks to face. Hating Tron is more of a meme than an actual factual position, at least for me, but we still don't mind showing you the free win against Tron, and more importantly, the post-sideboard gameplay against Tron is super interesting here. So we did get the free win game 1, but hey, if they're on a deck that's trying to do things like that, that will occasionally happen. They will go super deep, maybe throwing back like a below average 7 that turns into an unkeepable 6 and 5, and then before you know it, they're down to 3 cards and they get their only spell Inquisitioned away. It's going to happen, and it just happened there, so we'll take it, and let's figure out how we're going to sideboard against this deck before we go to game 2. So against Tron, we've only got 5 cards to bring in, but 4 of them are excellent, and the 5th one's fine, better than alternatives. So obviously land destruction is at a premium here. We've got the good old-fashioned Stone Rain that doubles as a Grey Ogre, and we've got the GQ that can loop with the Ren and 6 for good times on our end. And Stony Silence on legs is awesome against Mono Green Tron. Finally, we will bring in Kalitas Trader of Get. Even though as a clock relative to the rate you pay for him, he's very underwhelming against big mana decks. Notably, he does allow you to grind through Wormcoil engines a lot better than you otherwise would. And again, compared to some alternatives, is going to be more than serviceable. So these 5 cards will come in, and we want to cut 5 of these 9 cards in my view. The 2 Fatal Pushes being probably the worst. The only way you'd leave these in is if they're on really unusual sideboard tech, like bringing in Tarmogoyfs, which has happened before. It's a lot less, it's very unlikely, but yeah, pushes can go. And then, some number of Skoos and Bolt can be trimmed. This is a glorified Grizzly Bear in the matchup, and Bolt is fine in spots, whether you're racing or whether you're having to 2-for-1 yourself to finish off a Karn that ticked down, but it is one of the weaker cards overall. Everything else we're up to is pretty much fine here. So, again, no Jund expert, so I don't know whether it's better to trim 2 Skoos and 1 Bolt, or maybe 2 Bolts and 1 Skoos, but in my view it should be something like that. I think I did choose to err on the side of just bolting them out, so we left in 1 Scavenging Ooze, 3 Lightning Bolts, remembering also that Collector Oof is also a Grizzly Bear, so it's not like we lack for the bears, right? So I think we sideboarded like this precisely, and we will see you for game 2. Alright, on the draw here, against Mono Green Tron, the hand's good. Inquisition into Goyf into hopefully turn 3 Fulminator if we hit the third land, with ways to interact with the board and a curve topper. Definitely a nice hand, definitely a keep. Opponent's on 7 as well, no more mulligans all the way down to 3, and they go Basic Forest, a nice one by the way, nice Guru land, and pass. Definitely not the start of dreams for Tron. So there's two options here. First option is that they kept just a lands and spells hand. Maybe it's a couple forests, but they have a couple Sylvan Scryings, and they're going to work toward the mid game. You know, they know they're going to hit their land drops. Maybe they'll top deck the map. Maybe they'll just hit another scrying. They'll get Tron eventually, and they just don't want to risk the heavy mulligan against us. I think that's more likely than it might be in a vacuum, given how low they mulliganed against us in game 1. The other option is that they're holding up Veil of Summer. So what do? Well, we hit the third land. So we know we're going to cast Fulminator Mage on curve, and Veil of Summer also blows out Fulminator Mage, so for that reason, I think we're going to risk the blowout here. We are going to Inquisition. We could, of course, just do nothing and wait, and maybe they tap out for some reason next turn, but realistically, it looks like they're going to be holding this up, so we might as well try to get it out of their hand now. And indeed, they do have the Veil of Summer. It's such a good card against us. It's annoyingly good. And it's now in Tron, it's in Neo form, it's in Infect. Man, like, why are we printing answer cards that are good against interaction and good at protecting the non-interactive decks? I don't know, it's a mystery to me. You know, Counterspell's too good for Modern, but we get cards like this made. Just, yeah, I'll stop there. Little bit of a rant building up, but we'll tamp it down, right? We'll tamp it down, but such an incredibly good card against us, and we get blown out pretty hard by it. So Bones got the Urza's Tower, and the Sylvan Scrying. Definitely a bit of a scary start, bit of a nightmare start, but the good news is that does make it so turn 3 Tron is not possible, right? We're looking at turn 4 Tron at the best, and therefore Fulminator Mage is going to be good, pending, of course, another Veil of Summer, right? But for now, we are going to go ahead and run out the Tarmogoyf. Our draws have been fine. You know, the third land was definitely good. The Lightning Bolt is okay. Opponent's got the Ancient Stirrings. It's also worth pointing out, with Sylvan Scrying, they actually got Sanctum of Ugin. Sorry. I'm ahead of myself. Ancient Stirrings is going to find Sanctum of Ugin. That's right. Okay. Got a little bit confused there with their various tutor effects. The Mine was got last turn, and the Mine will be deployed alongside a Relic of Progenitus. Pretty annoying, but we should expect that card to be in the deck. So, Relic is definitely an annoyance, and how do we best sequence around that? Well, in my view, the thing to do is to try to attack with the Goyf, because it makes them decide, do we crack the Relic now to take no damage? Probably. And if so, that's actually kind of to our benefit, because it means we're going to be able to rebuild from the Relic as quickly as possible, right? So if we assume that the 3-4 Goyf is enough to incentivize them to crack it, no matter what this turn, certainly going to crack it if we Fulminator main phase, then we might as well attack first. And sure enough, the opponent will Relic to save their precious life points, and perhaps rightfully so, but it does mean, as said, we get to rebuild the graveyard ASAP. And we do Fulminator, and we do definitely Fulminator right away. Generally speaking, it is good practice to Fulminator them when they're tapped out. So even pre-Veil of Summer, we'd be doing this. Or if they had made a third land drop and done nothing on their turn, then maybe we play Fulminator, we wait until their upkeep in Fulminator. Again, pre-Veil of Summer. Those are kind of the best practices in a vacuum, but nowadays with Veil of Summer kicking around, you just want to Fulminator them when they're tapped out, under any circumstances, basically, and that's exactly what we do here. So hitting the Mine was clearly the right choice because they play Urza's Tower. Would have felt really bad to hit the tower, and then they just play a duplicate. You always hate to see that. Opponent will relic themselves. Think they might want to be relicking us, so we are less likely to eventually unearth the Fulminator or buy it back with any other effect, but probably doesn't matter. And they pass without having cracked the star. Very interesting. So we wonder about another copy of Veil of Summer being held up. Definitely seems at least possible. Or they could just be holding up Relic of Progenitus and bluffing the Veil. You really don't know. We draw Ghost Quarter. Awesome card in the matchup, obviously. It's arguably the main matchup, the main reason why this card's even in the deck. But they have only duplicate copies of Urza's Tower. We're not actually accomplishing much by GQing them, especially if we're suspicious for Veil. So what do? I don't think we need to actively plan to Ghost Quarter this turn. And if we don't, what then are our options? Well, Thoughtseize was a good draw last turn. It's still good this turn. We could definitely Thoughtseize them. But that kind of leaves us with not necessarily anything great to do. Yes, we can just spend the turn bolting them, I guess, but that's not ideal. They do have that other relic. We can't even count on it being like an essentially take 4 by growing our Goyf because they can relic us this turn. So, and there's no great Maelstrom Pulse target at all because we have higher priority targets for that we want to save it for, and of course either one of these can be sacked in response. So instead, we're just going to spin the wheel on Bloodbraid Elf. It's just the better play here overall, and we do hit Renin 6, so definitely could be worse. That definitely seems pretty fine to me. I think if we tick the Renin 6 up right now, it's going to A, shrink our Goyf, and B, maybe incentivize them to crack the Relic, getting us like lowest possible value out of both our Goyf and our W6, right? So instead we're just going to move to attacks first. Again, a lot of this is trying to read the opponent's mind, so you can make an argument for maybe taking up first, but either way, the opponent lets us connect, so that's kind of cool. Second main will try to buy back the land, and the opponent lets that happen too. Very interesting. Really expected the Relic to be cracked, but I guess they're going to lean on that more heavily in the coming turns. They'll begin by cracking Chromatic Star. Again, you expected at least one of these things to get cracked last turn. And then they've got Oblivion Stone. Then they run out the Sanctum of Ugin, so still no closer to Tron. You know, making land drops naturally is its own problem for us, but all things considered, this was not bad. Not bad at all. Alright, we draw Inquisition of Kozilek. So, another really interesting turn. What do? Well, the hard cast Oblivion Stone is on the field, and the activated Oblivion Stone can be achieved next turn with just a basic land drop of any kind, right? So I think the first thing we want to do is Thoughtseize, and the reason we're going to Thoughtseize first is number 1 for more information, and number 2 because we know it's going to be good. It's going to connect with something, whereas Inquisition could whiff. And number 3, this gives us maximum flexibility. Like, if we don't want to Inquisition, we can still, like, GQ and Pulse, or Pulse and Bolt, or something, right? So, Thoughtseize first is definitely the play. What do? We see Allah's Dust. Very problematic. We see Karn Liberated, very problematic. We see Wormcoil Engine, very problematic. So they've got a lot of payoffs. We can't really take them off of payoffs in general. So we could actually just take Chromatic Sphere and then go on the Pulse and Bolt plan. But again, bolting is not that great because we can't keep the Goyf big against that Relic. And Bolt will be just as good just about in subsequent turns, right? So instead what I decided to do here is to take the payoff that is most easily hardcastable, which is Wormcoil Engine, and then we know the rest of their hand. And from there, again, our incentives have not really changed from last turn. We're going to follow a similar pattern of attacking before we do anything else, forcing them to decide on the Relic early. And once again, they allow us to get over the line, so we're just going to take the damage while we can get it. That's definitely nice to connect twice with a medium-sized Tarmogoyf against an active Relic. 2 turns in a row. So from there, we are going to go ahead and fetch, get our Renin 6 value. Again, we don't have the incentives to aggressively Ghost Quarter. Again, instead we're just going to simply take away that Chromatic Sphere, which does represent a redraw. And then, of course, we get to pulse away that Oblivion Stone. That feels so good. So now the opponent is in deep trouble, and realizing that they are going to relic after the fact. So maybe the opponent should have done that anyway. It's hard for us to say, but we do know that our sequencing has kind of allowed us to get maximum realistic damage across against a relic. Again, if we had been main phasing bolts and stuff, they would have cracked the relic earlier. So sometimes you kind of have to go for the compromise, right? And getting any damage across with that Goyf was pretty good, if you ask me. Opponent's 2 draws from the relic and for turn have been Ghost Quarter and Expedition Map. So that's actually a little bit scary because they're a couple turns away from getting their payoffs online, just making land drops, But we're going to go ahead and Ghost Quarter the Sanctum of Ugin, get that in the graveyard, and there's not really a higher priority land to GQ anyway, and we're just setting ourselves up to be able to buy that back with the Renin 6. But first we're going to attack, and that actually grew the Goyf by 1 point of damage, which is not irrelevant, and not in the least, because our Lightning Bolt finally gets to see a little bit of action here, hitting them down to 6, growing the Goyf, which is going to put them down to 1, which actually, conveniently, don't forget about this part of the card, it's going to allow us to ping them to death with Renin 6 for a very stylish kill. Again, we were set up to buy back GQ if we wanted to, and in the Ren GQ loop after they've already gone through 2 relics is almost certainly going to be game winning, but it's better to just actually win the game, not play with fire, put them to 1, ping them to death. Thank you very much. So another nice little cameo from a lot of the red cards here. We see Bloodbraid Elf being just a really proactive way to help close out the game. We see Renin 6, even when it was not at its best, helping us curve out, threatening the GQ lock, and indeed just being the finishing blow, the coup de grace with the ping to the face, and Lightning Bolt, of course, also contributing to the clock in a couple different ways. So the proactivity of the red cards really shining there. But the core green-black disruption of discard, Fulminator Mage, removal, absolutely awesome, as always, against Tron. So we did, again, have kind of the free win game 1, but this was a really interesting game 2, where, remember, the opponent kept a good 7 and blew out our turn 1 discard with Veil of Summer. That is often too much to overcome against Tron, but we were able to navigate through the mid-game, I think, optimally. Again, some of the decisions about when to attack, when to sequence our spells, were judgment calls that were going to be better or worse based on how the opponent reacted to our sequencing, right? But given how things played out, I think we kind of maximized our damage at most stages of the game, which proved to be exceedingly relevant, right? Because we got them for exactly lethal, and who knows, they could have top-decked a Worm Coil engine next turn, and then all of a sudden we are pretty much in trouble, Even if we can start looping the GQ, we might just lose to the Worm Coil in and of itself, right? So definitely a really interesting game, in my opinion, and we do show how we can get there against Tron on Jund, even though we don't have access to Field of Ruin like we do on the Rock. So that was fun, and hope you're enjoying this league, my friends. Hope you're enjoying this format and this list, and we will see you for round 4. Match number 4 here with Jund, my friends, and this is definitely keeping a blind game on. We've got the early interaction, the flexible early interaction, a pair of Renin 6, 3 lands including 2 fetch lands, definitely a keep, obviously hoping our spells line up against what the opponent's up to, and the opponent will mulligan to 6. Arid Mesa will find them a stomping ground, and they will cast Faithless Looting. So, they're going to mill over Stinkweed Imp and Prized Amalgam. Looks just like Dredge to me. So, none of our stuff in hand besides maybe this Inquisition is particularly good. But we draw Blackcleave Cliffs, sure. I am actually going to go ahead and fetch Overgrown Tomb here. Just in case we draw Scavenging Ooze, we want to get green sources as proactively as possible. And we might really need to draw the Skoos. But we do Inquisition, and we see a glimmer of hope. The glimmer of hope is that despite the opponent having the turn 1 looting, pitching 2 great discard targets, and having a million, like a literal all enablers in hand, they actually don't have the second land. And without the second land, they might be reluctant to start dredging. It's just not that effective to start dredging when you're only on one land. They might need to take some natural draw steps to try to find the second land. And if so, it might give us a glimmer of hope in the match. And it also means we should be taking away the Faithless Looting here because it's just their best way to find another land, right? So we see that panning out. We see the opponent taking the natural draw step and not hitting a second land, so they play Shriekhorn. They will pass. Back to us. We continue to draw green sources, but no Skoos yet, so we'll just run out Black Cleave Cliffs. Get a Renin 6 value engine going, buy back a fetch land. Opponent once more takes a natural draw step and once more misses the land. So definitely feels correct to have taken the looting there. Opponent will activate a Shriekhorn, and what a hit. They find a Narcomoeba off the Shriekhorn, which is the actual best hit, I believe, because that's what allows them to bring back the prized amalgam this turn. They're feeling lucky, so they're going to do it again, and then they hit another amalgam and another Narcomoeba. The actual best hits, as far as I can tell. Hitting other dredgers is not that impressive because, again, they're not inclined to dredge yet on only one land, or at least they wouldn't have been. Now they've got this massive board, who knows? But anyway, it's back to us. Unfortunately, we've top-decked another land, so we're just going to start trying to stem the tide. We ping a Narcomoeba with a Renin 6, and we pass. Just got a whole lot of flood in our hands, basically. Opponent once more takes a natural draw, once more activates the Shriekhorns, this time finding only Bloodghast and 3 lands. They mill over the lands they've been seeking, but their board is a problem for us. We've got to spend the bolt on one of these amalgams. That amalgam was attacking... I don't remember who was attacking, sorry, I should have looked, but either way, we're just bolting an amalgam. I believe that amalgam was attacking Ren, but the Narcomoeba will attack Ren as well, and chip it down to 2. Back to us, and yeah, we're just flooded. What are you going to do? So we ping him, Narcomoeba, we pass. We've given ourselves a really good window in this matchup, but yeah, now the opponents hit the second land, and I'm just going to hit play here because it's pretty much all over. So now they get to Cathartic Reunion. They pick a second Stinkweed Imp and a Conflagrate out of their hands. They've got everything. They've got absolutely everything. And yeah, it's just unfortunate we flooded so hard. If we had maybe a proactive threat like Tarmogoyf, or of course a Scavenging Ooze would be ideal. We gave ourselves a window in that matchup and just flooded out despite kind of thinning out our deck with these Renin 6 fetchland buybacks. It'll happen sometimes, but that just shows you the hazards of the game one malaise that can afflict BGX decks, whether it's Jund or Rock or Abzan or Sultai. You keep Inquisition of Kozilek, Lightning Bolt, 2 Rens and 6s, and 3 lands, and it's a great hand in so many matchups, and it's a pretty poor one in a lot of others. Granted, most of our spells did some work here, but it's just not the right half of the deck here against a super linear Game 1 deck like Dredge. So they got us good, but that'll happen. That is alright. Let's take a look at how we sideboard against this deck. So against Dredge, we have a lot of extremely good cards to bring in. Kalidas, Nile Spellbomb, Grafdigger's Cage, all different aspects of our Graveyard Hate package, all very, very good. Plague Engineer, also very, very nice in this matchup. And Damnation, of course, as we've seen a lot this league, it's not the ideal matchup or anything, but it's definitely worth having access to in a matchup like this. And the final card I'll mention is Liliana the Last Hope, who is actually not the worst, but I did not bring her in here because we don't have all that many cards to bring out. And, my take on this might be a little bit different than other people's. Again, As I've said before, I'll say again, not the most experienced Jund player, so let me know, but I think we can all agree that Lily of the Veil is our worst card. Tireless Tracker, leveraging as a one-of could be fine, but definitely on the slow side. I did decide to hedge mostly away from Ren and 6 by cutting 3. Leaving 1 in is just a way to, ping the stray Narcomoebas. Pinging Bloodghasts is okay if we've got Graveyard Hate active, and a way to help curve out, but really not a high-value card in the matchup. And then just trimming Bloodbraid Elf for the same reason we trim a Tracker. We're just paring down on our top-end clunky, slow threats. Some people, move a little bit away from Fatal Push, or maybe you move a little bit away from Trophy if you're on a higher number of trophies and decays. For this particular match, with this particular build, I did decide to leave all of my removal in. Of course, a card like Fatal Push is very bad if you're already not disrupting their engines, but you kind of have to disrupt their engines to have a chance, and if you are, then Fatal Push, when paired with a Scooze or with a Spell Bomb, is reasonable. Same story with Kolagin's Command, especially because it can tag a Shriekhorn. If we were against Hogak, maybe Kolagin's Command gets a little bit worse compared to, who knows what, one of the cards over here. But because they are on Shriekhorn, and for the other aforementioned reasons, we do leave in the K Command, or at least I did. We leave in the 1 Ren and 6, we leave in the Lightning Bolts, the cards that you could make an argument for trimming away, but for the match that you are about to see, we were sideboarded just like this. Alright, ladies and gents, it's Game 2 against Dredge. We're on the play, and it's a 1-lander. And it's got a really high curve. But it's got Double Inquisition, which is definitely one of our higher value opening hand cards in the matchup. A little bit kind of incongruous to some people who are not as experienced to think that discard effects can be good against Dredge. I know when I first started playing BGX when I was brand new, I just assumed discard was bad against the decks that want to fill their graveyard, but as it turns out, taking away the enablers is big game. So, of course, Nile Spellbomb is the saving grace of this hand. I did decide to give it a keep. We definitely need to make land drops, but hopefully Inquisition is going to get us there. Now, we do also hope our opponent mulligans a little with a hand like this. Didn't happen. So the opponent's got a really nice hand. 3 lands. Narcomoeba is not great, but otherwise Looting, Cathartic Reunion, Stinkweed Imp. Some cards they want to see in the opener. And, of course, we have to go ahead and take away the Looting. And we are also now probably priced into the Inquisition next turn to take their other enabler, Cathartic Reunion. We do draw Blood Crypt. Really nice to hit a land off the top right away, especially an untapped one. We could ask for a little more. We could ask for it to be green, but hey, we'll take it. Overgrown Tomb would be nice, but hey. So we see the opponent has drawn Conflagrate. That is a bit annoying, but Cathartic Reunion is still the better take. They can just hardcast Conflagrate, for 0 mana, which is not that unusual of a play. But it kind of is a much clunkier way to go about things than the sculpting and value that happens with Cathartic Reunion. So, sucks that they drew another potential enabler anyway, but hey, we hit our second land, we've taken away their 2 best cards, and we have a Spellbomb down. So, it's going okay. It's going okay. We draw Kalitas Trader of Get, awesome card in the matchup, but one that we cannot cast, not really anywhere near casting, so we just kind of have to pass through the turn. As tempting as it is to cycle the Spellbomb looking for more lands, that is not correct. We've got to play reactively with it, given their hand. Opponent will crack the Arid Mesa, and Faithless Looting is coming, the flashback looting that is. If we wanted to stop it, we could have done so by cracking the Spellbomb in response to the fetch land activation, but I don't believe that to be correct. I think we let them have the looting. They put Narcomoeba and Imp into the graveyard, which I think is a good play. This is enough value in the graveyard that it does price us into Spellbombing, but at the same time it's not giving away too much value, and it's also 2 cards that we already knew about, so opponent is concealing max info and kind of pricing us into the Spellbomb activation, which that's exactly what we're going to do. We can't let them have the Stinkweed Imp, so since we're going to do it next turn anyway, we might as well do it now, trying to hit, excuse me, hit our land drops, hit more action. So, interesting, we did hit 2 land drops, we're on course to cast Kalitas and then Bloodbraid Elves. But, one of them's Barrenmoor, so I actually thought for a while about the difference between cycling Barrenmoor with a Blood Crypt, and A, that could hit us another land, B, that could hit us more action we want to do this turn, like maybe another discard spell or another Spellbomb. However, I think the ceiling of being able to actually cast Kalitas in Bloodbraid Elves is too high to pass up. We could also cycle the Barrenmoor into nothing great, right? And never hit our 4th land or miss our 4th land for too long. So I decided to play it safe. Just deploy the Barrenmoor. Next turn we'll have Kalitas. From there on out, we're guaranteed to be able to cast all of our stuff in the deck. Opponent does have another Faithless Looting, very annoying. They pitch Bloodghast, they pitch Prize Amalgam, and they have a Cathartic Reunion. So we were hoping they were a little light on enablers. Instead, they are quite high on them. The only saving grace is that they did not have a Dredge card to pitch to that first looting. So Reunion just fills the graveyard more, lets them churn through their deck a bit more, and find that 4th land that they need to buy back the Bloodghast, buy back the Amalgam. So it's all still very good for the opponent, but not as bad as it could be, right? So that's kind of what we were hoping for when we made the decision to play Barrenmoor. That said, we drew a Forest, so we would have had the 4th untapped land anyway, but, there's no way we could have known that, of course. So Kalitas, pass to you. Do your worst, opponent. Do your worst. And opponent is what happened there? Aha, Conflagrate from the graveyard. Okay, sorry, I clicked a little bit too quickly and missed that. So we did know Conflagrate was there, but okay, let's rewind. I should have addressed this. We did know that Conflagrate was there, so there is some consideration to casting Bloodbraid Elf instead of Kalitas. The reason for that is maybe Bloodbraid, just maybe, gets us Nile Spellbomb. But that's really the only great cascade off of Bloodbraid, because even if we cascade into like another Scooz or something, they Conflagrate away the Bloodbraid and the Scooz. That's just about as bad as losing Kalitas to Conflagrate. So I would rather play the Kalitas there, force them to Conflagrate when hopefully it's not otherwise optimal. Again, we know they didn't have Dredge cards in hand before this turn. And we also, remember, have Kolagan's command, so we can buy back Kalitas. That's why we expose the Kalitas there. Anyway, sorry, I forgot to mention that at the time. But anyway, the opponent has Conflagrated him away, and then they will loot. And they did manage to pitch some Bloodghasts to that Conflagrate, so that's pretty bad for us. Nothing else too crazy in the graveyard, though. And they've got a nice wide board. They hit us for 5. But they are totally empty-handed with no value in the graveyard. Sadly, we are kind of just hitting lands here, and it's all very slow. Like, we have to spend a turn buying back Kalitas with Kolagan's command, and then we have to play him next turn, so it's all very slow. It's just a good thing we were at a high life total when all this began. Now, once again, there was a consideration for just playing Bloodbraid Elf and hoping we get lucky. Yeah, maybe Plague Engineer now at this point would be the best hit off BBE, but we're putting our faith in Kalitas. Another interesting decision. Do we use this as basically a gain 2 life by pinging a Bloodghast, or do we try to draw step discard them? Obviously that can go really, really badly if we draw step discard them, but I did decide to roll the dice on it. You know, it can be nice to take away removal if that's what they're going to draw. Like, we're all in on the Kalitas living, so I think for that reason, it's at least debatably better to do it this way rather than to shock a Bloodghast, right? And we get a Shriekhorn out of their hand, so that's actually great. We are rewarded for that line, however, we are getting hit by the Undead for a total of 9, putting us to 4. We draw Plague Engineer, awesome card, but a little bit too late to the party. Once more, we're all in on the Kalitas. We're going to play that fetch land, but not going to use it anytime soon unless we have gained some life first. And it's back to the opponent. We're crossing our fingers they don't top deck anything good here. So it's over to them. They are going to make these attacks, so obviously we've got to block the big one here, block the Amalgam, and this is going to put us to 1. We're going to gain 3, we're going to take 6, it's going to leave us at 1. We have a zombie, and the opponent's got nothing else, so it's back to us, and we draw Nile Spellbomb. What a fantastic draw. What an absolutely fantastic draw, and whose turn is it? It's the Plague Man's turn. Everyone who's watched this channel since Horizons knows how much I love this card, and just look at it. Just look at it. That's why we name Vampire. We wipe the Bloodghasts. They're all gone. They're exiled due to Kalidas' replacement effect, which means that the Spellbomb wasn't strictly necessary, but obviously still a really good draw here. And then we are just smashing in for 5, gaining 3 life. It's all very good. Back over to the opponent. They're going to take the draw step and they're going to scoop it up. So that was a heck of a game, my friends. We were stabilized at 1 life on the back of Kalidas, Traitor of Get. The Plague Man comes down for the board wipe following, hard on his heels, and all of a sudden we just turned the corner out of nowhere with an unbeatable board state. So we were fortunate to curve out with our lands. In fact, to the point where we were almost flooded by the end of the game after keeping a 1-lander, but it just shows you the power of Inquisition. We took away turn 1 looting, we took away turn 2 Cathartic Reunion, we slowed them down a lot. Spellbomb kept us in the game early, and it allowed us the time to top deck the lands that we needed to make our hand good. So, definitely was a sketchy one, but we did get there, my friends. That was a fun game. Let's check out Game 3. Here for the decisive game against Dredge, my friends, and we do keep this one. It does not does not have green mana, but it has a Nile Spellbomb. Spellbomb alone is reason enough to keep a hand, Spellbomb in a functional 7 against this matchup. And Skooz is awesome if we ever get there with the green mana, which of course we hope to. So this is a keep. Unfortunately, the opponent will keep 7. We hate to see the linear decks keeping 7 all 3 games, I believe, which is what happened here. Maybe they mulled game 1, I don't remember. Either way, they go turn 1, Conflagrate, just to get it in the graveyard. So, definitely not their best turn 1 play. That would be Faithless Looting, but it's technically an enabler. Next turn, they can flash it back, discard a bunch of cards, and Conflagrate us in the face. And that's definitely an issue. So, we go ahead and run out the Nile Spellbomb. We've drawn a green land. It is Raging Ravine. So, it's a pretty good draw, pretty fine draw. Spellbomb, back to you, opponent. So, opponent will fetch, shock, and then they will Assassin's Trophy the Nile Spellbomb. So, what do we do here? Well, at first I was tempted to say, alright, I don't mind getting ramped. I could use a forest. But what happens there? They ramp us, we go get a forest, next turn we play the Skooz, and then we still don't have another green source that's untapped. So we just play a Skooz without any value out of it, and unless we top deck a green source for our turn, or top deck like another Nile Spellbomb, they're going to get to Conflagrate it and go off just as usual. So I think it's correct to actually Spellbomb them in a response, get rid of that Conflagrate, because remember, if they had a better enabler, they would have used it. And that way, getting a land out of their graveyard for Life from the Loam doesn't hurt either. But we don't get ramped this way, but I believe that to have been correct anyway. We are punished for that a bit, drawing another green card. Don't really have the green lands to use yet, so we're going to begin by cycling Barrenmoor, and we find another Nile Spellbomb. So, rewarded for cycling, rewarded for our sequencing so far, I think, overall, but once again, we are putting off the development of our green mana by a turn. Feels bad, but I think that's what we've got to do. I think it'd be irresponsible not to play the Spellbomb there, for sure. So, opponent will cast Cathartic Reunion, pitching Stinkweed Imp and Prized Amalgam, and that's going to pretty much price us into using that Spellbomb. We'd be really playing with fire, allowing them to dredge with the Imp. It might work out okay for us, but let's say they get some Bloodghasts in there. They have a fetch land out of hand, it's just not good. So we Spellbomb in response, and then they just draw 3 instead of doing any dredging. And look, they had the spell bomb, so then it's back over to us. We draw Verdant Catacomb, so it's nice to see an untapped green source, but as we've pointed out already, we have been incentivized not to play the Raging Ravine thus far, so we get to play the Skoos, but we don't have any activations. We just have to hope for one turn they don't have anything too crazy to do. Remember that we have already seen Conflagrate and Cathartic Reunion out of them as far as enablers go, so it's not unrealistic to hope that they won't have anything, but they have a Cathartic Reunion, another one, pitching a Stinkweed Imp and a Mountain. So that's annoying. They're going to dredge with the Imp. The first dredge hits another Imp and a Creeping Chill and a Faithless Looting, and the second dredge off of the second Imp hits Bloodghast, Narcomoeba, and that is just pretty horrible, my friends. Pretty horrible, and we've got this Blood Crypt sitting here doing nothing. So here is an example of we've seen a lot of the Jund pros in the matches that I've showed you, but this is most definitely a Jund con. Mana that is both less consistent and more painful, and specifically less green heavy for the purposes of this guy, purposes of the Skoos. Still proved to be good enough to leverage the Skoos against Mardu, but when you really need every single activation on curve against Dredge, Skoos is just not as good when your mana base looks like this, right? So, as if it wasn't enough, the opponents got another Cathartic Reunion after all that, pitching 2 more Stinkweed Imps, and hitting another Creeping Chill, and more Bloodghasts, and more Faithless Lootings, and more Dredgers. Prized Amalgam for good measure. Conflagrate is in the yard. Opponents down to 18 cards in the deck, which is a little bit insane. And they're going to attack. You know, I don't know at this point whether it's correct to bolt the Bloodghast or what, but we just take it. Back to us, we draw another Skoos. That's a little bit of insult to injury, because we just don't have the green mana to make our current Skoos that good anyway. We're going to eat the Conflagrate out of their yard because that's the thing that has us stone dead this turn, and then we'll pass. Holding up Lightning Bolt, I guess. And with our Ooze still only a 2-2. Opponent will loot, getting a bunch of other stuff in there at this point. It almost doesn't matter. Maybe we hope they're not paying attention. They're going to mill themselves out. That'd be pretty funny, right? But unlikely. They are getting back all the Bloodghast, all the delay triggers from the Amalgam on the stack, and they're swinging for lethal. So we are going to bolt one thing and then trade off the other. Maybe I should have just bolted the Bloodghast, would be technically a better play. But it doesn't matter because we are all in on drawing... it doesn't matter because we're all in on drawing Damnation or a Bust. If these Amalgams weren't coming back, it might be different. But we don't draw Damnation, we draw Basic Swamp, and that is going to be that. We just scooped to that unbeatable board state. So, as I just said during the course of that game, my friends, and as I said at the beginning of this video, we selected matchups here to show you not only good all-around gameplay, but some of the pros and cons of Jund relative to Rock. I can most certainly say that the mana base here was a con. I think our decisions were correct at every turn. Maybe if we had let the trophy resolve or played the Raging Ravine or something, it could have, earlier on, it could have lined up better for us, but on average, I think it was definitely correct to Spellbomb away their Conflagrate, to play the second Spellbomb instead of the Raging Ravine, to go Blackland Spellbomb on turn 2, then pass rather than Raging Ravine. We would have had to have gotten really lucky for those things to end up working out worse than the alternative of just developing green mana. But the point here is that the lack of green mana, including the fact that some of our green sources do come in tapped, just like they do in Rock, I guess, but it doesn't help here. But just the overall lack of green mana when we've got so many black lands and black-red lands flying around, it just means that we cannot quite leverage Scavenging Ooze as well as the Rock can. And I have played 5 or 6 leagues now with this Jund list of marks, and I'll tell you, a lot of my results overall have been good, but a lot of my losses have been extremely narrow losses to Hogak or extremely narrow losses to burn, or, this was not a particularly close game by the end of it, but if we just had one Scooz activation, if this Blood Crypt was just an overgrown tomb, I think we would actually have been favored to win this game, believe it or not. So you could call this a really narrow loss against Dredge as well. And that's just a hazard of the deck. You splash the third color, you pay the price. Even though Bob's not in the deck, maybe we can still say greatness at any cost, and we can say that comes with the territory. We've seen Bloodbraid Elf and Renin 6 and Lightning Bolt do a ton of work in this collection of matches so far, but here the mana base did let us down a bit. So close games, good games, but we are giving up some equity by splashing red to decks like this, and that came back to bite us here. But that is all right. We've still had some great games, and we've got the 5th match coming up for you right now. Final match here, my friends, and we're finally on the play. I believe it's the first time all league. Maybe I'm misremembering, but we've got a hand that's okay. Obviously, we hope Bolts and Goyfs line up well here because it's not doing anything else. And with 4 lands, I think it's correct to run out Blackcleave Cliffs there turn 1 so we can cleanly Bolt if need be. But the opponent's going Island and Pass, so yeah, not so much. And drawing another land is arguably the last thing we wanted to see, but we're going to play it. We're going to run out the Goyf, and the opponent's going to Spell Snare it. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm on green-black against a control deck, Spell Snare feels like insult to injury. It's like they've already got so much to outgrind us. On top of that, they can kind of trade up with a tempo-positive counterspell that's dead against a lot of decks, but very, very good against ours, right? So, Spell Snare, sometimes the straw that broke the camel's back, but, that'll happen, and it's back to the opponent. Now, I say that they're so able to outgrind us. That's from the Rock perspective. Jund is definitely better positioned overall against control decks, and we do hit a really nice top deck of Liliana of the Veil. Really, really hope she's going to either resolve here or maybe trade 2-for-1 with a Force of Negation, but she will resolve. That is awesome. That's really, really nice. We were looking in grim shape otherwise. Both players will pitch a basic land to her +1, and then it's back to the opponent, who is going to make a land drop and pass. So back to us, we'll begin by taking the Liliana up. It's not necessarily ideal to pitch these lands because we want to develop our mana, of course, but I think at this point we are more or less happy to pitch to keep these bolts, because if nothing else, we can just bolt them to the face end step, do it again next turn, and just stay ahead of our own Liliana, basically. On our end step, the opponent will flash in a Vendilion Click. So here we're just going to let the trigger resolve because it sees double Lightning Bolt. They decline to take one away, and will bolt the click while they are tapped out. Back to the opponent, they'll deploy a Celestial Colonnade, so no Cryptic Command or Board Sweeper this turn, but they do have a really nice play of Timely Reinforcement. Stabilizes the board, gives them a nice boost of life, and of course is good at pressuring Liliana. And then we draw Bloodbraid Elf right after we pitched to lands number, what would have been 4 and 5. Now we're stuck on 3. We can't cast the BBE. Feels so bad. And now we have to pitch our own Lightning Bolt, unless we want to either tick the Lily down or not use her, but we just have to put her to 6. We just have to keep getting cards out of their hand. We get Field of Ruin out of their hand, sure, but man, does that feel bad. And they find an oust to get rid of our Tarmogoyf, having free reign with their soldier tokens against Liliana, so it's all a bit rough, my friends. It is all a bit rough. We could have curved out really well if we'd had a 4th land still around for the Bloodbraid top deck, but we didn't. However, the opponent will empty out their hand, and we hit the 4th land. Better late than never. So the first thing we're going to do is actually Edict them. Why do we Edict them? Isn't Edict very bad value against blue-white control in most cases? Yes, but here, number 1, if they really want to, they're going to be able to kill our Liliana next turn with Colonnade, even if we put her up to 4. Number 2, we might cascade into another Liliana of the Veil, in which case we want to use this one first. So while the instinct might be for people who are used to playing value-oriented decks but not used to playing the card Bloodbraid Elf, the instinct might be to Bloodbraid first and see what you hit. that leaves value on the table if you hit another Liliana, which is why I try to remember to activate Planeswalker's main phase before casting Bloodbraid most of the time. But in any case, we're fetching, we're shocking to leave all of our basics in, which is good practice against blue-white, and then we will cascade into a Wrenn and 6, so yeah, that's a pretty fine cascade. We could tick up for value, but at this point, I'm actually more interested in ticking down to keep attacking their onboard presence, forcing them maybe to find some kind of a good play this turn to clear the way, or have to attack with a Colonnade. Unfortunately, they do have a really value-oriented play. Snapcaster ousting the Bloodbraid Elf. So will the opponent take care of our Liliana, or will they hit Wrenn and 6 down? The opponent will actually hit Wrenn and 6 down, which shows you just how valuable it is. And with good reason. They had a reason. They knew. Instinctively, they knew to fear the W6. Because who do we find off the top but our one of Tireless Tracker, who's been a little quiet in these games so far, but my goodness, is there possibly a better draw? I really don't think so. We get to tick up with both Planeswalkers, we're buying back a fetch land, we're making 2 clues off of the tracker, it is all wonderful. What a great way to start regenerating our value right after both opponents got put into sort of top deck mode with a bit of a board presence, right? Absolutely awesome. You've got to love it. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to protect our Planeswalkers right now, so the opponent's Colonnade will come across, and we are protecting whichever Planeswalker they value the least, though, right? Our tracker protects the Planeswalkers along the ground, but Colonnade will take care of Wrenn. And we crack a clue, find a Bloodbraid Elf, and then we also have a Lightning Bolt. So these are some pretty good plays. And once more, we're going to main phase activate Liliana. Once again, the Edict value is not great, but it's better than ticking up here for sure, especially because we could cascade into another copy. So time to throw out the Bloodbraid Elf, see what we hit, and it's an Inquisition of Kozilek. All right, a pretty poor hit, but we do have the Lightning Bolt. Pretty happy to just bolt the Snapcaster here while they're tapped out, which is going to allow us to get across for more damage here, and plays around counter magic and all that stuff. So opponent has found a land off the top, not very good, but hey, so have we. Not very good either. But a lot better because we have Tireless Tracker. Wouldn't be good under many circumstances. And we're just living the value dream, not only with the tracker and the Planeswalker synergy, but also just by managing to get all of our shock lands out of the deck before we've gotten a single basic land besides the one that we pitched early on to Liliana. Living the large and small value dreams at the same time. You've got to love it. If you play a deck like this, you know what I'm talking about. You got to love it. First clue crack yields a Tarmogoyf. Let's try again. And this one yields a Mountain. Okay, not the very best. And, at this point, one of their best outs is a board wipe, so I'm going to hold on to the Tarmogoyf. Instead, we'll use our mana this turn for yet another clue after they decline to block. And just get that extra point of damage across, and we are not overextending into a possible Supreme Verdict or Wrath of God. Opponent needs a good top deck, and they do top deck Narset Parter of Veils. Important to remember not to main phase clue cracks with Tracker when she is around. And they will Narset into a Path to Exile. They will upkeep Path or Tracker. Yeah, those are some good finds for the opponent for sure. So Tracker has done a ton of work, but finally bites the dust. We have found Scavenging Ooze. So Ooze is a pretty good play. It allows us to mess with Snapcasters, mess with their graveyard in general, and continue playing to the board without overextending. So once more, we're hang on to the Goyf, and once more, the opponent will pass. On the end step, we'll activate Ooze a couple times, actually looking to grow at this stage of the game to become a more credible attacker, one that can outsize Colonnade. But we never, if we don't know the contents of their hand, and if Snapcaster is live, we never want to go fully shields down, so we always leave one activation up, even when it's the opponent's end step. Opponent's got another Path to Exile. That's pretty annoying, although I think maybe they should have done it just on their own turn so we don't get more Ooze value here, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter too much. Unfortunately, though, our attacks are shut off right now. The Bloodbraid Elf cannot attack into the Colonnade. So now, once again, we want exactly 2 creatures on the board, enough pressure but not overextending. And Liliana the Veil is a pretty good draw as well. They do have the Colonnade that can take care of her in theory, but in practice they will probably not have the luxury to attack with it anytime soon. They draw another Colonnade for turn and it's back to us. Alright, we draw Thoughtseize. Man, this was our window to really put the game away, but we've been drawing some fairly dead discard alongside some very good other plays. Now, this is an interesting decision. Do we attack with both? If we attack with both, they're going to block the Bloodbraid Elf. They're going to go to 2. That does put them in Lightning Bolt range, which is a reason to do it. It does also mean that a lot of other things, including more Bloodbraids off the top in the future, can represent lethal. I, at the end of the day, talked myself out of it because I just don't want to throw away resources, even though we're almost at the stage of the game where that makes sense. And the opponent is indeed going to fire up the Colonnade, and now they're the ones throwing away a resource here because I guess they don't want to go into Lightning Bolt range and they want to use their mana as well while they have nothing else to do with it. So, makes sense to me, but I think if we had attacked with both, they probably would have blocked the Bloodbraid and said, alright, we need to make them have it, you know? But who knows? Who knows? I'm open to being incorrect about that. Again, this is the type of Jund decision that I'm not used to making. Opponent's opt yields only a basic land, so once again we have a window to close out the game, and once again we draw a brick of our own. So once more I decide to only attack with the Goyf. Again, not throwing away resources willy-nilly. I'll regret this if they top deck a board wipe, but if they don't, if they're, live for like top decking spot removal, this is better. So we're going to play that Verdant Catacombs even though we're out of fetchables, just in case we need Revolt down the line for like another Vendilion click, but it doesn't matter. There is no down the line because whatever the opponent drew is not sufficient to survive against Bloodbraid Elf, Tarmogoyf, and a Liliana of the Veil who is about to ult. So, feels good to take down blue-white control, the 2-for-1 potential of Bloodbraid Elf and of Renin 6 on full display here against a deck that I personally don't like seeing on Rock, but other people have corroborated this, and I can tell just from a few games that it is definitely better on Jund. So, feels good, my friends, feels good. Lightning Bolts were actually pretty relevant there, too, as well, despite being a less high-value card in the matchup. And, yeah, we got Blue-White Game 1. That always feels good, no matter what BGX variant you are on. Let's take a look at the side. Against blue-white control, my friends, we don't have all that much to do, but that's kind of in line with my own philosophy on teching against the matchup, aka not really doing it so much, just playing cards that are otherwise good in a lot of other matchups that can also come in against blue-white. So Mark has followed the same philosophy here. We're not seeing Choke or Thrun or anything like that. So we are seeing Fulminator Mage, very nice way to, just like you saw me not overextending into sweepers, playing like 2 creatures at a time, well, Fulminator Mage can be a good part of that. He can turn a sweeper into a 2-for-2 if you only have 2 creatures down, they verdict. You fulminate a land in response, it's just kind of a 2-for-2. Or it can let you go even wider and still get the value if they do have a verdict. Or it can just win the game. It can just Stone Rain them out of the game. It's a kill spell for Colonnades. It's a great card. Nihil Spellbomb, also a really nice card. You only want value-oriented graveyard hate against blue-white control. No ley lines, no surgicals, nothing like that. And how many you want is actually going to vary based to some degree on what you've seen. But for stock blue-white lists, which is what our opponent appears to be on, I have found 2 Spellbomb to be the magic number. Not necessarily inclined toward the 3rd unless we have some actively bad cards to get out of the deck. Finally, Liliana the Last Hope kills their Snapcasters, kills their Vendilion clicks while ticking up, ticks down to buy back a threat that got countered, and is a win condition in her own right. So these 5 cards come in, and everything else you're seeing here is great. Every card that's left in the deck, besides this column over here, is great against blue-white control. So what comes out? We're going to cut a black Cleave Cliffs. Same principle as cutting one for the mid-range matchups, and we were cutting both of these fatal pushes as well. Then Lightning Bolts is fine, but kind of a low-value card on average, so you can cut 2 Lightning Bolts and call it good, or you can cut the 3rd Lightning Bolt and play only 1 bolt in favor of the 3rd Spell Bomb. Again, without having the expertise in Jund, I'm not confident telling you which one is exactly better, but I personally lean toward a more hedged approach with 2 bolts and 2 spell bombs, and looking exactly like this as we go into Game 2. We're on the draw against blue-white control. Our opponent has kept 7. Worth noting that aside from that one extreme Tron mulligan, our opponents have barely mulled in any of these 5 games, and we're going to keep 7 as well. It's definitely a risky one, but on the draw we're more likely to curve out, and if we hit even one more land, we have the Renin 6 plus fetch land resource advantage. We do have a turn 1 spell bomb, so we have some proactive things to do early that can also help ensure we hit our land drops if we need to cantrip aggressively. We've got Liliana into Bloodbraid. We've got Trophy for any high value permanent like Jace. This hand is absolutely incredible. It has everything that we need. So despite being a bit of a risk, I keep because it's got everything we need if we hit the lands, and because it's very tough to mulligan and still come out ahead against a deck like blue-white control on average. That doesn't mean you keep unkeepable hands, but it does mean that we can err on the side, perhaps, of riskier keeps if it means not having to mulligan, and if it means the payoffs are there, which they are. We've drawn Tarmogoyf. It's basically not a second land, so I don't want to see it. That's all there is to it. It's a fine card, of course, but opponent's turn 1 Colonnade turns into a turn 2 Opt into a tapped Glacial Fortress, and we never didn't have it. We top-decked another land, and it's a Bloodstained Mire, which is just as good as anything else because it's letting us keep the basics in our deck as we go on the Renin 6 Rampage. Play the Renin 6, take up, buy back a land, and now all of a sudden we are ahead. We are officially ahead after having done that. Obviously, it's far from over, and the opponent's got a Rest in Peace, so that's going to make our Renin 6 and the Tarmogoyf we just drew a lot worse, to say nothing of Niall's Spellbomb, because note, when Spellbomb is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay black if you do draw a card, so we cannot actually cantrip with the Spellbomb while Rest in Peace is around. So that's really interesting from the opponent, but do note they didn't make the 3rd land drop, so we were not the only one who kept a land light hand, and the opponent's not rewarded for it, unlike us. We draw Barrenmoor, which would otherwise have been awesome with Renin 6 if not for that meddling Rest in Peace, but we'll have to settle for a mere turn 3 Liliana of the Veil uncontested, which is obviously incredible against the opponent's deck. And we'll pitch the Tarmogoyf, who is currently a dead card under the RIP. And we get a Cryptic Command out of the opponent's hand. You gotta love it. Opponent will opt. Main phase, looking for more land drops. They will opt into an Opt, I guess. And then still no land, so definitely unfortunate for the opponent. We draw another Liliana of the Veil. So, another interesting decision here. Do we want to cycle the Barrenmoor? What do we want to do? Well, I thought about it for a while. The one thing I am pretty sure about is that we don't want to trophy anything because they're so land screwed. So I think before we give them any other information, we can afford to tick up and pitch the trophy and get a Snapcaster Mage out of their hand. Then, respecting how far ahead we are, respecting the power of Bloodbraid Elf, we are simply going to just play Barrenmoor as a tapped land. It's the second time we've done it this league, and it's definitely far, far from optimal. And there are probably arguments for cycling it and hoping in the next 2 cards there's another untapped land. Then you get more value out of the card, right? But we're so far ahead that we just want to not fall behind. You know, we can afford some moderately suboptimal plays as long as it means we're going to get to Bloodbraid Elf next turn. And that's exactly what we're going to do, but once again, we're making sure to activate at least this Planeswalker early on. No real reason not to. We'll pitch the extra Ren in 6, hanging on to another Liliana in case they've got like a Celestial Purge in hand or something. But then it is most definitely time to spin the wheel with Bloodbraid Elf. And we hit Inquisition, which is mighty fine. Very happy to get a discard spell off of that. It's a nice window for it. And the opponent has clicked past that a little too quickly. The opponent had Monastery Mentor, which we took away. This is a good value-oriented piece. We do have a Lightning Bolt to kill it, but we might as well not give them the chance to stick it and protect it with Force of Negation. We'll just take it away. They do have the Force of Negation and a Path to Exile and a Teferi. So lots of good value, but I think I felt fairly priced into taking the Mentor there. And, of course, we're going to attack with the Bloodbraid Elf. Opponent will path us. And getting an extra land never hurt anybody. Back to the opponent. They do hit land number 4, and it's Teferi time. Client's starting to slow down here. Hopefully it won't spaz out on us too much. And they're going to bounce their own Rest in Peace. This is an interesting play. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's just because I'm at the end of this long league. I think they should have just ticked down without bouncing anything. Or they could have even bounced our own Nile Spellbomb. I don't know what good it does to bounce their own Rest in Peace here. And note that it says up to 1. It says up to 1, so they don't even have to bounce anything if they don't want to. All right, they just want the draw. But who knows, maybe they think Rest in Peace has outlived its usefulness, and they're going to pitch it to Lily if we tick up. But, I mean, we got a Renin 6 about to alt. I think they want the RIP. So, again, maybe I'm confused here, but the draw of Tarmogoyf is a good one, and we are indeed going to ping the Teferi, and then I judged the best play to be this. We're going to Liliana double Stone Rain. We get to kill a Colonnade this way because we're splitting up their lands, 1 Colonnade in each pile. Of course, they're going to choose the pile with the 2 dual lands, but for that reason, we give them the... Ooh, interesting. Okay, sorry. So I said, of course, we expect them, all else being equal, to choose the one with 2 dual lands, so we gave them the one with the basic land untapped. I just spoke horribly there, but you understand what I mean. So we're going to play the Liliana, and maybe they've got like a Spell Snare here or something, or just another Path to Exile. So we tick up, and I actually did this and then thought immediately, this was kind of a misplay. They pitched the Force of Negation, and I just kind of assumed, because I was confused by their Teferi bouncing the Rest in Peace, I just assumed they were going to plan to pitch the RIP. But instead they pitched the Force, and now we're going to play the Tarmogoyf, but of course they do have Rest in Peace to shut off the Goyf. And now we're losing our window to cantrip with a Spellbomb. So I think what I should have just done there is ticked up, pitched the Goyf, held onto the Bolt, held onto the Spellbomb. We can cantrip with the Bomb in response to RIP if they recast it, and if not, we've just got it up. So I think that was a little bit of a misplay there, or arguably less than optimal play, partially because I was confused by them bouncing their own Rest in Peace. And yeah, sure enough, there's the second RIP, but look, it's not that bad. The opponent's down on 2 lands still, we've got 2 active Planeswalkers, and we top deck a Fulminator Mage, and now's the time to just Stone Rain that Colonnade. Liliana is just massacring them this game. She ticks up, she gets a path out of their hand. Renin 6 is back to alt threshold, and the opponent has just seen enough. They've just seen enough. It doesn't matter that our Goyf is a 0-1. We haven't done a single point of damage to them. We have just ground them out on the back of this terrible tandem of Renin 6 and Liliana of the Veil. Terrible for the opponent, that is, but what an oppressive curve out we had here, my friends. That one felt great. It feels good to put blue-white control to the sword. They have been a source of some frustration in the past with me on Rock, and the grinding power of Renin 6 plus the proactive nature and 2-for-1, nearly guaranteed 2-for-1 of Bloodbraid Elf means that Jund actually has a lot of tools in the matchup. It only sounds like a couple things, but those are actually big difference makers against blue-white control. And unlike against Dredge, against Hogak and Burn, as we mentioned at the end of last round, the Jund mana base does not particularly come back to bite us here. So feels great, my friends, to bury blue-white control so decisively. And there you go. Those were our matches. So there you have it, my friends. Some good games, I hope, with Jund. You might have seen me stumble and bumble a bit my first couple times out with Jund. I had literally never played the deck competitively before, nor did I even really have the luxury of playing any warm-up games before the first couple times I played a donation league with Jund. These days, thanks to Mark, I am way more comfortable on the deck, and I think the play here was pretty good, but of course I'm always looking to improve. So if you saw any lines, you saw anything you disagree with, definitely let's hear it in the comments. Would love to hear from you. But the list felt really, really good. 4 Renin 6, 4 Liliana of the Veil, 4 Bloodbraid Elf is a really good core. Of course, we like, Kawagan's Command didn't do all that much in these games, but it's felt really nice in some other ones. The one of Tireless Tracker has felt really nice. When it's good, it's great. Absolutely great in this Renin 6 Jund. And, the one thing that I did feel over the course of the several leagues that I played, is that little bit of softness to the Hogak and Dredge decks. Because I'm just used to scraping out wins with Rock on the back of Scavenging Ooze that can't quite manage to get there as well or as consistently here with the 3-color mana base of Jund. So I did think that maybe, just maybe, one of these cards, one of these value-oriented, high-curve black cards could possibly make way for like a one of Surgical Extraction or something like that, just for the next couple weeks that the Hogak meta persists until that card gets banned anyway, right? So, again, no Jund expert, but those are my... that was the one thing I felt was slightly unbalanced about the deck, but by definition, the sample size is small, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But either way, thanks so much to our brand new Patreon supporters, Tobias Gallman and Alex Barbera, and thank you especially today to Marc-Andre Kurisinski for letting us borrow the Renin 6, for being such a good Patreon supporter that he earned the donation league. And, thanks for sharing this great list with us. And, I hope everybody out there enjoyed this content. As I said, we've been doing an unusual amount of replays lately due to a combination of donation league recipients requesting them, and also replays fitting a little bit better with my busy month. But I will be sure to bring you some live recorded gameplay in the near future. We're going to go back to good old Golgari midrange next, and maybe do a little bit of a theory video as well, expanding further on some of the differences between Rock and Jund that I identified here. That might be of interest to people, so we'll think about that. I also might be playing a donation league with elves. That's right, with elves. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. We're in talks. It's in the works. Elves are a deck I used to play back in the day before I went all in on the green-black path. They were the first kitchen table deck that I converted to Modern when I jumped into the format like 3 years ago now. So anyway, that was our league. As always, my friends, look forward to hearing from you. Patreon.com/GrimFlareMTG is the best way to support this channel. If you are enjoying it, we have tier rewards for your support, including the fact that if you donate $50 over the course of your lifetime, you will qualify for a donation league, just like the one you witnessed here. You can subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment, all that good stuff, word of mouth. It all helps me grow. Thank you so much to everybody doing any or all of those things. I truly appreciate you. Thanks once again to Mark, and stay tuned to the channel. Talk to you soon. Hope you have a wonderful day.